Under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight, a young boy stood barefoot on the cracked pavement. The night air in Manila was heavy with the scent of fried food and exhaust fumes, but he barely noticed. His world, in that moment, was no larger than the battered guitar cradled in his arms. The instrument had only 3 strings left, each one frayed and stubborn, yet to him it was treasure. He strummed carefully, coaxing sound out of what most would consider broken. His voice was soft at first, nearly swallowed by the chaos of jeepneys honking and vendors calling out their last sales of the day. Still, there was something in the way he sang, a fragile honesty that tugged at anyone who happened to pause long enough to listen. Most people walked by quickly, distracted by their own troubles. A few glanced his way, tossing loose coins into the small tin at his feet without slowing down. To them, he was just another boy among thousands, blending into the city's endless noise. But inside, he carried a secret. Each note was more than survival, it was a promise. He dreamed of a day when his songs would reach beyond these streets, when people would truly listen and see him, not as a nameless boy from the slums, but as a voice with something to share. As the final note lingered in the humid air, he whispered to himself with quiet determination, "One day, they will hear me." The boy's song floated through the humid night, weaving between the blaring horns and the sputter of tricycles. Somewhere down the crowded street, a car sat unmoving in traffic, its headlights casting long shadows across the pavement. Inside, a weary talent scout tapped impatiently on the steering wheel, glancing at his watch. He had flown across the world looking for something fresh, something real, but after countless auditions and forced performances, he felt only disappointment. Then, through the noise, he heard it. The faintest thread of a melody, trembling yet alive, cutting through the chaos with startling purity. Curious, he rolled down his window. The voice grew clearer, each word dipped in longing, each note raw with truth. It wasn't polished, not perfect, but it was honest in a way that reached deeper than technique ever could. Drawn in, he stepped out of the car and followed the sound until he found the boy, hunched over his broken guitar, singing as though the night sky itself was listening. The scout stood frozen, his heart pounding. This wasn't a voice meant to be hidden under the roar of city traffic, it belonged somewhere bigger, where it could be felt by thousands. When the song ended, he approached slowly, not wanting to startle the child. "You sing beautifully," he said softly, kneeling to meet the boy's eyes. "Would you like to sing on a bigger stage?" The boy blinked, uncertain if he had heard correctly. Hope and disbelief collided inside him, his small hands tightening around the worn guitar. The lights were blinding. The boy stood center stage, clutching the microphone with both hands as though it might slip away if he let go. The crowd stretched before him like an ocean, faces blurred together, cameras flashing, judges seated in sharp suits behind a gleaming table. For a moment, fear wrapped around his chest. He had never been this far from home, never stood anywhere so grand. The memory of the cracked pavement and flickering streetlight tugged at him, threatening to pull him back into silence. A hush settled over the theater. He closed his eyes and remembered his promise, "One day, they will hear me." The first notes left his lips shaky, quivering under the weight of expectation. A few in the audience exchanged uncertain glances, unsure of what to expect. Then, as he reached deeper, something shifted. His voice steadied, swelling with emotion drawn from years of longing, hardship, and hope. Each lyric carried not just sound, but a story. The crowd quieted completely. Judges leaned forward, caught off guard by the depth in his tone. Tears shimmered in the corners of eyes that had seen countless performances, but none quite like this. It wasn't the perfection of his voice that moved them, it was the honesty. It was a boy with nothing to his name, standing under the weight of bright lights, daring to pour out every dream he had ever carried in his small, fragile frame. By the final note, the room was breathless. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy in the theater, as if the entire world was holding its breath. The boy lowered the microphone, unsure of what he had done. Then, all at once, the room erupted, cheers rising like a wave, applause crashing against the walls. Tears streamed down faces in the audience, strangers united by the voice of a child who had nothing but gave everything. At the judges' table, one hand moved swiftly. A golden button was struck with such force it seemed to echo louder than the applause. Suddenly, the air filled with music and an explosion of shimmering confetti rained from above, blanketing the stage in gold. The boy froze, eyes wide, as the glittering pieces clung to his hair and shoulders. He pressed his hands to his face, overwhelmed by the roar of the crowd and the sight of strangers standing for him. One of the judges wiped away tears and leaned into the microphone, her voice trembling. "You reminded us tonight why we fell in love with music in the first place. You sang from your soul, and it touched ours." The boy's chest heaved, torn between laughter and sobs, his small frame shaking under the weight of the moment. In that instant, he was no longer just a boy singing for coins under a streetlight. He was a symbol of resilience, of hope, of what it meant to dream despite hunger and hardship. For the first time, he believed, the world was truly listening. The performance did not end on that stage, it rippled outward, carried by cameras, screens, and countless hearts. Within hours, the boy's song spread across the world. Strangers in faraway cities stopped scrolling, paused in cafes, and gathered around glowing phones just to hear him sing. They didn't see only a child from Manila, they saw a dreamer, a reminder of what courage and hope could sound like when given a chance. Messages poured in, not just of praise but of action. Families sent donations to his community, organizations offered food and school supplies, and music teachers reached out, eager to mentor him. For the first time, the narrow alleyways of his neighborhood echoed with laughter instead of hunger, lit not by a single streetlight but by possibility. Reporters asked him how it felt to go viral, to be celebrated across continents. The boy, still shy despite the golden confetti and the thunder of applause, answered with simplicity. "I sang so people like me won't be invisible anymore." His words carried as much weight as his song, and in them, the world heard a truth that could not be ignored. Though he had stepped onto that stage as just one boy with a broken guitar, he left it as a beacon for millions, a voice for the unseen, a light for the overlooked. His journey was no longer just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever dreamed despite the odds. Sometimes, the smallest voice can awaken the world.